Okay, this was in the introduction. Wild Virginia is a membership organization. We get money from our members. If there are people in this group that are not members of Wild Virginia by the time I'm finished talking, I really hope you want to. It's very important to us and to our work, so I will bring this up again.
Ernie, we're sending your petition around so people can read more about what your work.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's almost 2 million acres of national forest in Virginia, which you may or may not know. The George Washington is over 1 million, and the Jefferson in the southern part of the state is less than 1 million. But go ahead and go to the next slide. But Wild Virginia, we are a nonprofit. We do more than fight pipelines. We work with the Forest Service and sometimes work against the Forest Service. In the case of the pipeline, we're doing a little bit of both. When the Forest Service has projects we get involved in, we go out on the site, we do ground truthing with them, and we make sure that the worst projects are canceled and that ones that shouldn't be where they are get moved. Do all of the things that we can possibly do to make sure that projects in the National Forest don't happen where they don't belong, and that they are minimized and that their environmental impacts are as close to zero as possible. Go ahead, next slide. A lot of this is duplicative, as you will notice, but of course this shows the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia, the George Washington, and the Jefferson, and this is a map of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and it shows where it slices through there. Next slide. This is a watershed map. This is the one that we've just created. And you may or may not know that the reason that there is a moratorium on new fracking leases in the National Forest is primarily because of you all. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you can see the watersheds here, and you can see where Washington, D.C. is. What you don't see on this is where the National Forest is, but the headwaters of the James and the Potomac River is in the National Forest. And when D.C. Water came out against fracking in the National Forests because they knew they did not have any ability at all to deal with what might happen should any of those foul fracks go fouler, then that put so much pressure on the National Forest that it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and at that point they realized that it was in nobody's best interests to allow more fracking in the National Forest. So I thank all of you who had a piece in doing that. But if you take a look at this, you'll see that the Atlantic Coast Pipeline is also part of the headwaters of the Potomac, your Potomac. But when you drop down south to the James, almost every stream in the headwaters of the James is being crossed by this pipeline because the majority of the headwaters is to the north. And you can see that it bisects the James right on the Nelson County, Buckingham County border. But when you look at the Mountain Valley Pipeline, now you're coming down into the Roanoke River watershed. And the Roanoke River watershed not only is being affected at the headwaters here from the Mountain Valley Pipeline, look what happens down in North Carolina with the ACP. So the Roanoke River is being crossed by both of them. So when you're talking about water, this is where erosion, sediment control, and possible leakage becomes a huge, huge, huge issue. Next, please. This is the Transco line, which we have already talked a lot about, so I'm not going to repeat it. We'll just go on to the next one. But this shows the National Forests, the Jefferson to the south, where the Mountain Valley Pipeline crosses, the George Washington, Monongahela to the north, Buckingham County, and I'm going to get back to Buckingham County again before we leave because something very important will be going on there in the future that could disrupt the entire ACP project. And it also shows how the direction of the gas that flows from these pipelines into the Transco line could end up at Dominion's Cove Point LNG terminal. Have any of you all been to Lesby, Maryland? Okay. I have never seen a company town in West Virginia that rivals Lesby, Maryland. They own the police, they own the city council. Dominion is so deeply entrenched in that town that you cannot stop in front of the LNG natural gas terminal without a policeman coming up and threatening you, as they did me for taking a picture. Next slide, please. There was some talk about karst earlier. It's really interesting. There have been some reroutes of the ACP because ACP LLC likes to say that they're doing everything they can to minimize the environmental impacts. So when the Shenandoah Mountain salamander and the Cheat Mountain salamander were being impacted by the potential route, ACP chose a reroute, which drops to the south of the original route through Bath County and increases the amount of karst geology that it's going to be crossing. Just a month ago, there was another reroute through Bath County. ACP said that they were rerouting it because of the karst, and when they did that reroute, the geologists that we and they in Bath County had hired said, actually, it's worse than the first one. You know, more karst, worse karst, and anyway, next slide. That's our karst map, which we've already talked about, so we'll keep going. One more, please. Okay, this is a key area when you're talking about the National Forest, because both Mountain Valley Pipeline and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline cross the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. There are currently 6 pipelines in the country that are all proposed to cross the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. You cannot mitigate the impacts to the AT. When you demolish the viewshed, it's gone. It does not come back. And anyone been to Wintergreen Resort here? There's people that know Wintergreen. Mile marker 13 when you're coming down from Afton Mountain on the Blue Ridge Parkway. At Reed's Gap, Kirk mentioned that there is a proposed 4,200 foot directional drill that would go beneath the AT and the Blue Ridge Parkway there. The way they do this is really interesting. The drill starts right at the gatehouse to Wintergreen Resort. So the impact to the resort is going to be massive, and the folks at Wintergreen, those that own property there and Wintergreen property owners form Friends of Wintergreen, they are one of the strongest lobbies against this, because both the physical, environmental, and economic impacts to them is going to be significant. What you do is you drill all the way through the mountain, if they can, because it's never been done before. When the drill comes out on the other side, they have to erect 4,200 feet of pipeline. It has to all be seamed and completed and held up with cranes. It's almost a mile. And then it's pulled back through the other, back to where the landing started. And their engineers, who have never done this before, say, oh yeah, we can do it. But if we can't, then we'll take another route and it won't be quite so long or quite so deep. And if we can't do that, then we'll do a conventional drill that would even devastate the viewshed more than that.
So they're going to be drilling holes and seeing if they can do it?
At any time that their engineers decide that it's not feasible, they will abandon Plan A and go to Plan B. Plan B to Plan C.
And the ratepayers pay for that?
Yeah, it's just an expense item.
Can maintenance be done on these pipes when they're already in the tunnel and being used? Like if there's a bad weld or something, can any maintenance be done?
It's an engineering question.
Yeah, they would have to build some kind of walkway through the tunnel to get to the joints or wherever they're having problems.
Okay. Thank you, Kirk.
We'll do the TIG inspection.
Okay, we've seen this slide before. We've actually seen this slide before too, but I live right here. This is in Nelson County. And the blast zone and the evacuation zone are the orange and yellow areas here that Kirk showed you earlier. But one thing that boards of supervisors don't know along this route, our board of supervisors still don't believe that this is true, but PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration, has requirements that they put in place for zoning in these areas. The requirements on the zoning is going to depress the value of properties all along this route. So it's more than just the direct economic impacts that we have found are going to happen from this. So what do? This is what you do. Next slide. Okay, Friends of Nelson formed 3 years ago with a bunch of concerned citizens who all showed up at the Board of Supervisors meeting saying, WTF, what's going on here? Board of Supervisors had no idea. We've been asking questions ever since and still don't have many answers that satisfy. Friendsofnelson.com, one of the great places to get updates on what's happening. Next slide. Allegheny Blue Ridge Alliance, this is from their webpage. Sierra Club, Friends of Nelson, Wild Virginia, 52 groups are part of this coalition, all unified against the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. They put out a weekly news alert, and you can get that and you can go online and get the backlog of those. Next slide. Dominion Pipeline Monitoring Coalition, for any GIS lovers and mapping, there are story maps online that'll give you more and more information than you would ever want, and done in a really brilliant kind of way. Next slide. So while you look at this slide, because I have to wrap it up really quickly, I do have to let you know that it is my firm belief that these pipelines are not going to be built. And so there are numerous ways that this pipeline can be stopped, and I need to let everybody know so that you don't go away from here thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? This is a done deal, because it is not as far away from that as it could possibly be. First, FERC could deny a certificate of convenience and necessity on the ACP. Okay? It's only happened once ever before, but it has happened, and nobody has ever put as much pressure on FERC as we have. It's never been in the public eye as much as this is, and most pipelines have about 25 people that monitor their site to see all the information that comes about them. There are over 500 people on the FERC mailing list for the ACP, and there are over 200 interveners. Wow. So any of those people could actually file a lawsuit against a FERC decision. Secondly, Dominion can withdraw their application from FERC. How could they do that? They have to feel a lot of pressure. Do you think they're feeling pressure when you see the amount of money that they're throwing at this and what they threw at the governor's election that just came out of the primary? So that is another good possibility. The Forest Service can deny the permit to cross the National Forest on both of these pipelines. They have the ability to do it. Wild Virginia, Sierra Club, Southern Environmental Law Center, Appalachian Mountain Advocates are leading the charge to make sure that the Forest Service, if they should approve this, that we find out legally and show them that they really don't have the ability to do that. The state of Virginia can deny a water quality certification to go across there. You've heard a lot about that. There'll be a breakout session about this later on. There's more. The Virginia Outdoors Foundation, Kirk talked about conservation easements. Those conservation easements, which the people who own those easements feel they can't be mitigated, the Virginia Outdoors Foundation could agree with them and say, no, you can't build across these conservation easements. Are they likely to do that? Well, if you know anybody at the Virginia Outdoors Foundation, give them a holler, put more pressure on them like we are doing. Finally, litigation. The groups that I mentioned, we have been building a legal case since day one on this. And some of the best legal minds in the world are working on this, some of the most concerned citizens. We've been building an informational case with experts since day one, and we believe that we have the tools to be able to stop this legally. Finally, direct action. Litigation takes time to develop, and it's going to be very, very important that the people in Virginia and in North Carolina and West Virginia do the things that we can do to slow down this process so that the events that happen every single day that show what a terrible idea these pipelines are, reach more people, become louder, and do what we need to do so that our litigation can prevail, or any of the other things that I mentioned. Finally, final pitch for Wild Virginia one more time. Please become a member of Wild Virginia. We need your help to be able to do this and to be able to fight this. We do lots of things. We take people out into the woods so you can fall in love with it. We do education programs. We monitor the Forest Service. And we do lots of things. So please join us and become part of us, and we would most appreciate it. And thank you for having me.